welcome back to Regenerative Business. Sam Garcia here, of course, and I have a very special guest today. This is someone who actually DM'd me, and I never take DM pitches, but it was such a good pitch because, of course, they did cold pitch magic and checked all the boxes, but no, they're just an amazing person. So, welcome, Mel, to Regenerative Business. We're so happy you're here.
Yay, Sam, thank you for having me on. I'm so glad that the pitch worked, and I'm glad we get to get into this discussion today.
Yeah. So if you do not know Melinda, known to their clients as the social impact queen, they're a Black, queer, neurospicy social impact strategist, wealth redistribution advisor, speaker, thought leader, and educator. They founded and is the principal advisor at the Rooted Firm, which is a social change consulting firm rooted in anti-oppression and decolonization praxis. Mel has worked with some of the biggest Grammy award-winning artists and producers in the entertainment industry. Think of your favorite artist as a radical wealth redistribution advisor and social impact strategist. And now to make this work more accessible, they're doing all sorts of stuff online, including coming on to this podcast. So we're going to be sharing all of the stuff that's has been super behind closed doors and make it accessible for you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you.
And I was telling Mel before, I was like, I feel like your bio is so full of dopamine hits. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's so cool.
And it's like for being an ADHDer, it's like I'm constantly having to seek out the sources of dopamine. So it's really funny that my bio reads that way. It's like for me too.
Now, I'm going to ask the question that I think everyone is wondering, which is what
Yes.
a wealth redistribution advisor is. So please tell
Yeah.
us.
Yes, absolutely. So, a wealth redistribution advisor. First, I should say before I started the Rooted Firm, I actually used to call myself a philanthropy advisor.
Mm,
And then, as I was going throughout my life and work doing philanthropy advising, quote unquote, I realized that, wait, I don't actually believe in the philanthropic model.
mhm.
And I think that I should probably stop calling myself a philanthropy advisor
Yeah.
because it just doesn't quite make sense and it doesn't get at the root of who I am and what I do and what I want my work to be in the world. So I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to name my own path here. And I started calling myself a radical wealth redistribution advisor, which is someone who helps people who have monetary resources be able to distribute them to people who are most in need in ways that help us as a collective to create more sustainability for one another, as well as help to dismantle the systems that make it so that people are in need. So it's really about eliminating this idea of hierarchy, which is very prominent in philanthropy. It's like, I'm the giver, I am above, and I
Mhm.
give to you peons beneath, with the money I have as a gesture of my
Yeah.
wealth and goodwill.
That trickle
It's
down, right?
exactly the trickle down, which never trickles down.
Uh,
Instead of that, it's about how am I in community and giving in solidarity
mhm.
with my siblings and my neighbors and the people around me in the world? And how can I do that most strategically and most effectively to be able to get as much impact as possible out of all of those gifts? So that's what I help folks to be able to do.
So is there a threshold? I'm sure there is with the people you work independently with, but is there a threshold with this kind of work in terms of how much money someone has or how many assets someone has before they can start thinking about wealth redistribution in their own life?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. I love it because I don't think my answer is one that you'll be expecting, but I think, like our Queen Rihanna said, if you've got a dollar, you've got enough to share. And I
Mm.
do mean that. Now, like, as far as hiring me for my services, we need more than a dollar.
Yay.
But,
But in terms
you
of our
know,
conversation today, right?
exactly. But you know what? No, I think that we should always be thinking about ways that we can be giving and sharing what we have. There are different metrics for how much you might be giving, depending on what you're making in your business, depending on how profitable you are, if we're looking at this through an entrepreneur's lens. Certainly, but if you've made, I don't know, $10,000 and you give 1,000, or you decide, hey, I want to give 10% of my profit. So maybe your profit is $10,000. You can give that thousand. Or maybe you've only made 1,000, but you say, hey, you know what? I'm committed to making sure that I'm distributing what I have. So maybe you take 100 instead. And that goes to whichever people and causes and projects and communities that you feel need it. So I think no matter what you have, no matter what resources you have, we can all think about ways that we can share. I always caution folks, like, we don't have to dip into like the martyrdom complex where it's, I have a sandwich, you are hungry, and I give you my entire sandwich, and I go hungry and you eat. That feels like a little bit of the kind of sneaky martyrdom complex that sometimes comes into giving, that especially those of us who have big hearts have to watch out for. But there's a world in which maybe I only have a sandwich and you don't have anything, but if I split my sandwich, you have half and I have half, so
Mhm.
neither of us are hungry. So it's thinking about it through that lens. And it means like just giving what you're able to give and what you have, and not feeling, if I'm not giving a $200,000 donation to this organization, I'm not doing anything. It's
Yeah.
no, like $25, like that can go a long way. Or maybe for this organization, it's not going to do a lot, but hey, if you've got a neighbor who just got laid off, $25 is a meal for them to feed their family. So I think there's always a way that we can be sharing resources no matter what we have, and we can do it in a way that makes sense for us,
Yeah.
where we're not bankrupting ourselves, but we're also still participating in this like system of communal reciprocity and helping keep one another afloat.
So, what I love so much about this is I have a strong feeling that this conversation is going to bring a lot towards the individualized, intentional decision making that can make impact feel so much more meaningful on
Mhm.
both sides. Because if we look back to like in religions, right, there's like these overall things of what everyone should do, of like that 10% tithe. And I think in Islam, it's like 2.5%. And it's like
Right.
where it's like we're putting things across the board. And I think maybe institutionalizing giving is a lovely thing, but to actually sit down and decide what feels meaningful, what feels impactful, how
Mm.
you actually envision your role in being a part of the change in society, it changes everything, right?
It does. It really does. It
Mhm.
does. And then you think about it, and that intention creates a shift for us, especially internally. I like really appreciate some of the ways that I've seen people think about, no, but really, what do I want to do? And what
Yeah.
does that look like outside of a maybe a religious context where folks felt like it was demanded of them to be giving money, and maybe there's some resentment came about because of that. We also sometimes I talk to people about just what are the barriers to giving? And sometimes that comes up. It's like cultural differences where it's no, like you can give to your family, but you don't give out people on the street, you don't give to those people. Or like we were talking about before with the religious context, maybe it was like you saw your mom struggling to make ends meet, but she always gave that 10% tithe. So I think being able to like have that like self-determination, being able to sit down and say, here's what I have, here's what's important to me, this is how I want to show up and how I want to give, and this type of world that I want to see created from this giving, I think is really powerful.
Mhm. So, what do you think the biggest issues are with the current conversations on the internet around using money to make change and wealth has
Mhm.
the potential to do good in the world? Because I see some issues here, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you can speak to that directly.
Yes, of course. So I think there are quite a few issues, and I know that some of them occur like in the specific context of the kind of coaching and wellness space. And then I think there's some like bigger overarching issues. One of them, I think, is that we hear a lot about wealth being able to do good. And hey, girl, if you're trying to like make change in the world, go work on your business, and business can do all this stuff to bring about change. And all those conversations are good. And I'm glad that they're happening, because sometimes if you don't put together business and change making, then you might not have the frame of reference to even understand like how much power that businesses have to create change in the world. So I'm really glad that people are at least planting that seed. I
Yeah.
think we got to water the seed a little bit more, because I think there's other stuff. There's other stuff that we have to think about. There's an intentionality as well. So it's, yes, wealth and business and being in a position where you've got abundant resources can create good, but how? What is the strategy? How are we specifically using that money in order to do good? And then what are the things that we also have to be careful about?
Yeah.
Because there are certainly times where it's okay, we see that there are people who are making money and who aren't doing it ethically. And then it's almost like some cleansing ritual. And
Yeah.
then if I give to
Mhm.
this organization, then all is well. And it's, is that enough? Do
Mhm.
we also have to be mindful of how money is coming in?
The ends justifying the means, or there's that one saying that like
Exactly.
the road to hell is lined with good intentions.
Yeah, totally.
Good intentions and
We-
good results.
And it's, we don't want to be so morally rigid, but it's like the moral perfectionism. Like, we have to do the best we can under capitalism and white supremacy. It sometimes hampers our ability to really do things in the way that we would want to. But
Yeah.
I think that there has to at least be a mindfulness of you can't scam people and then give that money to folks who are hungry. Like some would argue maybe you can. Maybe at least the hungry people are getting
Like this
fed.
weird, it's like this weird like Robin Hood scenario, maybe.
So yeah, I think we have to think a little bit more deeply about the conditions and the circumstances surrounding how we're bringing money in as well as where it's going when it's going out. We have to think about the how. So what is the strategy around how this money is actually doing good in the world? And then I think we also have to define what is the good we're actually seeking. One of the things I do sometimes when I work with clients is they're like, "Okay, should I tell you what issues I care about?" I was like, "No, I want to hear more about what does the world look like? If you have all the money in the world and you could give it to the causes that you want to give it to, what is the world that we're going to be living in post your giving? And it creates, we're working backwards, and it creates a little bit of a different, bit of a different spin on it,
Yeah.
because you do have to envision not just who do I want to give to or what issues do I care about, but dare to imagine a world where those issues don't exist. And then what does that look and feel like? And then we get to work backwards. What would have had to have happened for this to no longer be an issue? So I think in addition to the other things that I mentioned, it's also just thinking about what is the good that we're trying to create? Because good can mean a lot to a lot of different people. There are people who have supported, there are a lot of philanthropic donors who give to super PACs who support like Donald Trump's administration. Is that good? That might be good to them. So we have to define what is this good that
Yeah.
we're actually working towards so that we can be giving in ways that support that and not in ways that create harm. So I think those are just some of the things that like really come to the top of my mind when I think about that question.
Wait, I don't know if you're able to answer this because of NDAs and whatnot, but is there
Okay.
the most unexpected or interesting way you've seen your clients answer that question?
Ooh,
Like how they have this vision and then suddenly the way that they are just redistributing wealth turned into something like that you wouldn't expect or is just different than the philanthropy model.
ooh, okay. That's a really good question. So, without saying names, there was an instance where we went through that exercise and the client was wanting to give to more organizations that were doing like political work and advocacy work around a specific issue, which was really good. But in thinking about it, we realized that they're not thinking about the policies, like when they're envisioning the world, they're thinking about like the people and how the people are living and how they're relating to their families now and all that kind of stuff. So then what our approach became more of a mutual aid approach. Like actually, no, let's dig into these smaller communities a little bit and see about how we can give in ways that more directly impact the person. Like either strategy would have been fine. Like it would have been fine if we said, you know what, let's focus on in the political realm because we understand that like politics does shape like everything about how we live. But I think for them, they were really feeling more pulled and called toward people and how people's lives are better with envisioning after their gift was made. So then we were like, you know what, then we focus a little bit more on direct service. So these are initiatives that are going to directly serve the people that are in need because that seems.
Wait, okay, so let's imagine that you're speaking directly to the listener. Hello, lovely listener. And they're sitting in front of you and you want to invite them to ask this question of themselves. You've probably heard me mention the regenerative business ecosystem, but what actually is it? RBE is my all access membership for online entrepreneurs who want to build thriving, ethical, nervous system safe businesses, ones that feel as good to run as they look on paper. Inside, you'll get every single course, workshop, and template I've ever created, from copywriting alchemy and drill-worthy offers to evergreen ecosystem and your root system. Everything's organized into clear learning pathways, so you'll always know exactly what to focus on next for your season of growth. And when you join, you'll get a personal onboarding audio from me, like a private welcome ritual where I help you identify your next right steps based on where you are in your business right now. But my absolute favorite part of RBE is the live calls. Every month we meet twice. One of those is always a Q&A call with me where I answer every question you asked. You'll get what you need every time. We also move through quarterly implementation cycles, themed seasons of focus, reflection, and growth, plus access to audio drops, a private podcast, and a vibrant community where collaborations, referrals, and real friendships happen. RBE isn't another hustle container. It is a living ecosystem built on rhythm, reciprocity, and regeneration. When you join, you get to grow your wealth and impact without losing your aliveness. Members have used these tools to double their income while working fewer hours, rebuild their creativity after burnout, and finally feel grounded in their leadership again. You can join us now at thedirtyalchemy.com/RBE, and podcast listeners get 20% off their first month with code PODCAST. Your next season of ease, expansion, and impact starts here inside the regenerative business ecosystem. Join now and have your best year yet. Can you just take us through that?
Sure, sure. Okay, so wonderful listener, thank you for being here. So I would want you to close your eyes and maybe take 2 deep breaths, like in through your nose for 4. Try to hold it a little bit if you can, if that feels good and it feels accessible, and just let it out for 6. And feel your body start to relax a little bit. Feel a sense of, if you can, even for a moment, even if it's not the truth of your condition right now, feel a sense of like internal safety washing over you and completeness and feeling like, oh, it's done. It happened. We did it. It's done. And do one more deep breath, holding on to that it's done feeling. We did it. We're on the other side of it. The things we were having to fight against, we don't have to fight anymore. They're done. They're over. And now we get to build. And I would want you to ask yourself, if you could be like an architect for this newly liberated world, what would your blueprints look like? What would you be building? What would the world look like now that we no longer have all the issues, especially the ones that are specifically important to you? How would we relate to one another? How do we interact? Are there borders? Are there no borders? Is there more community? What's happening in this new world? And how do we do that? What's the process for that? Who helps us come together as a community and work through those things? And the people who were experiencing those issues, who were part of what I call sometimes the like victims of these unresolved social issues and systems of oppression, what are their lives like now that that's no longer a thing for them? How do they walk through the world now? What's different? And then I would invite you to just inhabit that world as long as you possibly can, noticing every little thing that you possibly can, from the feeling you get when you see a neighbor to how you're getting your food. What does that look like? Are you going to down the street to a beautiful plot of land where all your community has come together to plant and you're taking food? Are you going to a store where everybody now has access to, no matter how much money you make? Try to notice as much as you can, dwell in that world for as long as you can. And then I would love to hear what wisdom came to you from that world. Yeah.
You can DM Mel. What is your Mel? What is your at get called in?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your response. And you can DM me too.
Yes, please.
I would
I
love to
want to
hear
hear
it
it.
too. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so what's the next step there? How do we take this big grand vision into something that doesn't feel pie in the sky?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So then usually what I do is as folks go through that exercise, as they really begin to think, what I often find is that once you do that, there are often specific things that people are
Mm,
really drawn to or
mm,
think about or have this pull toward. And
mm,
then that kind of becomes some of the breadcrumbs for, okay, then, so what are the things that you really care about? It gives us a chance to
mm,
root into what are the things that we value? What do we want to see? Like for even as I was talking about it, like I was talking a lot about like food and I'm a foodie. I love food. But there's also issues around food sovereignty. There's food apartheid, which is like the newer term for food desert,
mm.
which it tells more of a story than food
Yeah,
desert. As deserts are naturally occurring,
yeah,
apartheid is not.
yeah.
Even like hearing myself talk about access to food, it seems like when you were in that space, a lot of what you were experiencing in that newly liberated world had to do with food, had to
Mm,
deal with community, to do with collective decision making. So, how do we then pick those things apart and think about, okay, what are initiatives that we can do within whatever sphere of influence you have that bring in those things that you really feel connected to and want to see improved upon, and then we can go from there. So that could look like something as simple as, in terms of a giving strategy, of helping to give in maybe local food banks that
mm,
are specifically in areas where folks are economically disenfranchised and or where there is a strong prevalence of food apartheid. It could look like creating a small fund and determining however much that particular client might want to put into that fund, but maybe we create a small fund that just goes out for mutual aid for folks who express a need for food. Okay, I
mm,
don't have any groceries. Is there anyone that can help me with this? And it's okay, I have this fund that's already set aside for that. So, boop, there we go. This person needs this. There's someone whose toddler just had to get surgery and they are at the hospital and don't have food, or they're economically disenfranchised, so don't have access to it. So, I can pull from that fund that I've already put aside. And as I see things come across my path, I
mm,
can then give. So there's those ways of doing it. And then there's also ways where we can look at what are like food sovereignty sorts of projects that are going on, maybe that are led by folks who are traditionally not represented in philanthropy, like those. Just as a clue, it's always folks of the global majority. Like, unfortunately, like the amount of money from foundations and other institutional givers that goes to people of the global majority is in the single digits. It's,
Wow.
I think, like 7-ish, 7%, which is nuts.
There's probably a list
Yeah,
of causes and organizations that are led by people of the global majority. That's
exactly.
gotta exist.
I hope so.
Like, I
I
feel like
have
it's
not
just
found it,
Googleable.
but I would love for it to exist. I feel like
Uh,
if the Regenerative firm, if that's our contribution is like
yeah.
putting that together, then that would be
I am
amazing.
convinced in my head. I'm like,
Yeah.
someone's already done this.
Yeah, but and that can be part of that
Mhm,
strategy is like, okay, we know that institutional money, which represents a significant portion of the money that's
mhm,
distributed for philanthropic like work, is
mhm,
not going to this demographic. So then we can focus specifically on
mhm,
that demographic of people who are doing work in this particular like food sovereignty sort
mhm,
of area. There's a lot of ways. It's really fun for me. It's like putting together a puzzle. It
uh-huh.
really tingles like the creative part of my brain. So I think no matter how much you have to give or like where you're at or what issue you're passionate about, we can always find really cool intersections and ways to, again, put that money into very specific places and create very targeted impact that takes into account a lot of the issues and the shortcomings of
Mm.
philanthropy itself. And we can stand in those gaps.
Yeah. So something that I always come back to, this is like a very personal thing for me, as a really sensitive person, and very passionate about certain things. I put guardrails on myself where I have decided and or continue to decide of these are the things that I consider my responsibility. These are the things that
Mm-hmm.
are my causes, my issues that I'm committed to. Just because you see this genocide happening
Yeah.
and this big thing happening, and you're like, fuck, I need to fix this too, or I need to contribute to this too, and then completely overwhelmed and your resources are diluted over a bunch of different things. So that's one of the
Mhm.
things. But I bring this up because in my little visualization, when you were giving us that visualization, is there's two things that are like semi-connected. but they're separate enough that I'm like, they feel like different issues, or I would go about them in different ways. I have the
Yeah.
one side when I'm envisioning the future, and it's very like nature, food sovereignty, that sort of stuff. On the other side, and this is the thing that feels heavier for me, is land back to Native Hawaiians. Because in Hawaii, it's different than the mainland in the sense that the monarch of Hawaii, when Hawaii became a state, a part of the agreement, you're nodding, so you already know, but I'm sharing with everyone else. The agreement was there would be like X amount of acres of lots and lots of land given to Hawaiian people. And that land is locked up. People are dying on the wait list to get their homestead land. It was called the Homestead Act. And people have to move. There's like a big community in Vegas, a big community in Seattle, a big community in Washington, like all over the place of people, Hawaiians having to move away from Hawaii because they can't afford to live here because of tourism, and a lot of tech Californians moving over here and
Mhm.
buying up land, and they don't get the land that was promised to them. I learned a couple years ago that some of the homestead land that's again like promised to Hawaiians, the Maui airport is on that land. And you better believe
Mm.
they're not like paying money to lease that land.
Of course not.
They're like, or if
Yeah.
they are paying money, it's going to the state, which is not run by Native Hawaiians. And it feels like such a heavy thing that I feel so passionate about, but it doesn't feel, and of course, it's related to the food sovereignty side of things, which feels like almost easier for me to contribute to. But okay, that's my long story around like, how do you connect the semi disparate directions?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, also like the absurdity of people who are not Native Hawaiians telling Native Hawaiians what land they can and can't have. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous and like horrifying. But yes, to your point, connecting like disparate topics. So this is like one of my favorite things to do because I love to think about what are the connections that maybe we're not seeing
Mm.
that we can potentially explore as way to help to really amp up your giving and how you engage in these things that you're like passionate about. And I will echo, I appreciate you talking about the fact that it's like you have to put the guardrails on. And
Mm.
I think for the people that are listening to this, who follow your work, who may follow my work, like you are the people we're talking to about the
Yeah.
guardrails because like you've got big hearts, you really want to give to everything and see everybody do well. But again, we have to think about there has to be an element of you have to make sure that you're okay as well. Okay doesn't have to be I'm 100% all the time and I only give when I'm at 100. Like it can be like, yeah, I'm like 75, so maybe I can't give as much as I would give if I was at 100, but I can give something. So we have to have those boundaries. And I think that part of that is actually being able to connect those more disparate causes because if you're really passionate about the genocide in Gaza and
Mm.
you're passionate about land and
Mm.
you're passionate about food and being able to grow food, I guarantee you there are families in Gaza who are growing food because they're actively being starved by the Israeli occupation. And there are mutual aid funds for like gardens that you can actually support. So you're getting your food and you're getting to support also the people of Gaza. There's actually a really cool initiative in Yemen right now that's called Roof Gardens. So, of course, we know Yemen is another country that continues to be bombed by the US and other like Western nations, and the people there suffer quite a lot. And they were, I think, Yemen, I'm not sure if they're still it's like the one of the I know Sudan is as of right now is like the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world. Yemen is not far behind. And to speak to the resilience of the Yemeni people, one of the things that a gentleman has done is created these rooftop gardens where there is so much scarcity in terms of food. Many people are able to actually grow gardens on their roofs. It's a really cool initiative. And so then now they have other ways to be able to get food in a really dire humanitarian crisis. And so there are opportunities where, again, if you're passionate about food, but also wanting to contribute to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen or contribute money to help with that, that's a cool way to bring those two things together, contributing specifically to that like roof garden sort of project. Yeah, like for you, Sam, with this land and land back, I'm wondering like, are there ways that we can kind of explore maybe even unconventional connections to the two and thinking about, okay, Hawaiians are not being permitted to settle on their land as they're supposed to, and they're not being given the land that they're due, like that certainly does create food insecurity. Is there a way to think about, maybe are there like co-ops that are growing food and maybe splitting and selling it and splitting profits to be able to help, I don't know, finance like building on Hawaiian lands, like once Hawaiians are able to access them? That could be a few degrees of separation away, but
Mhm.
could be something in the ballpark where your gift could be supporting both land back as well as that like food piece or the like food sustainability. So we could always like offline work on it a little bit more. But yeah, so I think one of the ways that we, as people who have big hearts and want to see all the issues in the world solved, if we can find as many intersections as we can with the things that we're really passionate about, and find, here's a really specific thing that I can give to that encompasses multiple of the things that I'm passionate about, and it allows me to support something, because usually stuff like that, those aren't always the best supported initiatives. They're a little bit more off the beaten path. So then you have the opportunity again to really do some deep, like good, by supporting those with resources.
I think I've talked about this on the podcast, but I talk about the guardrails because I really do believe that there's a million different causes you can support. Like,
Mm.
and again, as like a soft-hearted, sensitive person, you could feel like, okay, look at all the things that I need to help, or I want to help with everything that comes across my path. And if we can just realize, if you can tap into the ones that like really light you up or really put you on
Hmm.
fire, and trust that the other ones put other people's hearts on fire, then we're all part of this larger network of support, which could like speak to your
Yes.
tree metaphor a little bit.
It does actually. And you know what? There's a kind of a metaphor that we use in the social impact space that's like trust the night shift. So it
Mm,
means like you go and you do your stuff during the day, but there are people that come in after you during the night that are working and doing their thing. So it's the idea that you don't have to do it all, because there are other people, like you said, Sam, other people whose hearts are lit up by some of the that yours is.
mm,
So those people are doing their work as well. And that also helps to take off a little bit of that pressure for us to want to try to solve everything.
yeah.
And really, I think for in order for us to be effective, and I'm like this a soft-hearted one as well, so I'm like preaching to myself, but in order for us to be effective, we have to focus. There's just really no way around it.
Yeah.
We have to focus and we have to be on our square so that the
Mhm.
person next to us can stay on theirs and the person next to them can stay on theirs. And then if we do our efforts collectively and consistently, that's organizing, right? That's part of how we win. But sometimes if you're here, there, and everywhere, you can't really be effective anywhere.
Mhm.
So it's really important to focus. And it's no, you deciding to focus exclusively on food sovereignty does not take away anything from this other cause that you're passionate about. In fact, it
Mhm.
puts you in a better position to be able to show up more consistently because you're not overwhelmed by everything else,
Mhm.
and you create more impact that way.
Mhm.
So I know it's hard to hear. And I actually I have a like free ebook titled The World is Burning, What Do I Do? And
Mhm.
I give this analogy of being on a basketball team. There's all these different positions that are on a
Mhm.
basketball team. But if the power forward tries to go be a point guard, A, they might not be suited well for that position. And B, they've also left a gaping hole where the power forward should be. So now we can't win. But on a basketball team, everybody has a different role. And in order for the team to win, everybody has to play their role. So I think part of focusing is like getting into your position and playing your position and allowing others who are better suited for other types of work or other positions to play their position. And that's how we get there as a group.
So my what I feel like I'm hearing people wondering, how do I identify my role? Because it's
Yeah.
like obvious on a basketball team, like you have to
Yeah.
apply and the coach tells you, and you usually have like certain skill sets, but like how do you even determine
Mhm.
your role? And maybe that's not even the conversation for today, since we're talking about radical wealth distribution.
Yeah. Yeah, and I won't go too long on that. I will say I have my free ebook. It's actually, I talk about that in there. There are some really incredible people who've done a lot of work on this. Deepa Iyer is one of them. She has a social change ecosystem, if I'm not mistaken. And it literally has all of these different roles. There's dreamers, there's weavers, there's visionaries. So if you reference her work, that's a really good start because you can identify, okay, where do I fit in more of a general sense? What am I? Am
Mhm.
I a visionary? Am I a healer? Am I a disruptor? And you could be multiple of these things. But if you think about like maybe your top two, then that already gets you halfway there into determining what your role is. Now, if we pair up that kind of role with the things that the issues that really drive you, then now we can start to more readily identify, okay, like what might be a good position for you in this thing. And again, it's not something that you have to dedicate your entire life to necessarily. It can just be like the focus for now. What's the focus for now? How was that? Did I like that? Do I feel, is this fulfilling? Am I being effective? And maybe then you choose another position for the next year. So there's nothing that's like
Yeah.
locking you into this for life. But the goal is to get that forward momentum and get very focused so that you can start doing things and you can start being effective and then reevaluating as you go. Yeah, I would say like referencing Deepa Iyer's work is a really good first start. And then, like I said, I've got that The World is Burning. What do I do? That's a free resource. You can feel free to look at that. And of course, like I have other stuff that I've created that could be helpful as well if you want to dig more into it.
There's two things that come up for me with the idea of the role in the future, and I am very not sure what the future holds, like most of us. But
For sure.
I moved to Hawaii in 2013 because I thought I was prepping for societal collapse. So that's
Yeah.
my like I go that direction.
Yeah.
With roles, there's what's the thing that's easy for me to do? It's
Mhm.
okay. In my relationship with my husband, it's easier for me to channel money into things and it's easier for him to do the farming work. It's like, okay, easier thing for me is that. So that's an easy role for me to play. But then there's the other side of it where watching my husband's business where he like can't find anyone to hire to do farming with him because no one wants to be a farmer. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
people that say that they want to be farmers, at least like in the environmental movements, but no one
Yeah.
actually wants to be a fucking farmer. But like, what an important role. What is easy for me to do that like just comes naturally and I can like easily channel money in or whatever that, or I can easily network or I can easily connect these people together. But then there's
Yeah.
the what's needed to be done. And maybe it's not natural for you, maybe it's not fun, but it's the thing that's needed to be done. Like the farming needs to be done if we're talking about
Yeah.
food sovereignty in Hawaii and not importing
Hmm.
stuff. But in those can be
Exactly.
like, I'm not sure if there's a spectrum, but I think those are two very important things to identify and potential directions for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good. And I think being able to identify what is easy and what is like in what you can do that feels natural, like that's going to put you into a rhythm of consistency because you can do that and that's easy. If we can find one thing or a couple of things that are easy, we can do consistently, then I think that can also help us to get the spoons to do the stuff that needs to be done that's a little bit harder. And
Mhm.
then I think especially if you have privilege, like that especially a place where you can jump in. Like
Mhm.
I'm sure there are plenty of folks who are physically disabled who have found ways to
Mhm.
do farming work, but it would really help if folks who are able-bodied would
Yeah.
step in and
Yeah.
do that. So we can
Mhm.
also think about like how do you leverage your privilege to do the
Mhm.
stuff that needs to be done that may not feel natural, that may be on the more difficult side.
Yeah.
But again, if you've got privilege, like here's a great way to be able to use it.
So good. One thing before we jump off, can you define economic resistance for us? It's something that we're gonna tiptoe around, and I
Yeah.
feel like that's such a good term that a lot of people can be able to use and think about.
Yes, yes. Okay, I like got giddy when you asked me that question. Like, yes, economic resistance. So for me, the way that I'm thinking about it is any ways that we can essentially use money as a pressure point to be able to get the systems that harm and oppress us to concede. So it's a way that we push back
Mhm.
on oppressive systems, oppressive conditions through money, which we know because we live under capitalism, is the pressure point. I have a whole economic resistance training that's specifically for entrepreneurs. And
Mhm.
it's like, how do we, especially because we bring money in, like we channel
Yeah.
money, how do we use that as a way to, again, help to dismantle these systems and these oppressive conditions? And, I talk about like, boycott as an example. I talk about strike. We talk more about mechanisms of capitalism and how do we disrupt those things.
Mhm.
And I think one of the cool things is that I happen to believe that small businesses, and not necessarily small in terms of income, but small in terms of like you don't have middle management and stuff
Yeah.
running your company. I think that small businesses are part of the answer to how we create change in the world and how we really begin to dismantle the fabric of so many of these systems that were set up and create so much harm. I think about And I bring philanthropy back into this, the adage that big boats turn slowly. And so I think sometimes people are thinking that our institutions, these larger than life entities, like we're waiting on them to turn that big boat and make the change that we need. But I don't think they're turning fast enough for the urgency of what we're experiencing, both in terms of our earth, in terms of the socio-political climate, in terms of the multiple genocides that we're seeing across the world. So I think it is on those of us who are more agile, which
Yeah.
to me is small businesses, to be able to help to do this work and to help through the power of our dollars and how we give them strategically and direct them to be able to really lead the way on this. It makes me think of the Global Samud Flotilla.
Mhm.
And if you were watching them as they were on their way to Gaza, the Israeli Navy put out a whole blockade, and so many of those boats got through. And this is a multi-billion-dollar Navy, but they got through because they were smaller and they were more agile. So these huge Navy vessels could not keep up because they were outmaneuvered by people in fishing boats. And I
Mhm.
think that's such a beautiful metaphor for like how I see our role as entrepreneurs and small business owners, like in this landscape of resistance, of revolution, is that we get to outmaneuver the big institutions because we all have power, we have assets, we have networks. So when we really get together and start looking and working strategically, then that's when those conversations about how wealth can change the world will really start to manifest like in actual change. So I hope that's encouraging to anybody who is a business owner and who's listening. Like you are the answer. Big institutions that are just wrapped up in bureaucracy and who are incentivized to continue to operate in the way that they have for years do not have any incentive to turn any faster than they're turning. So
Mhm.
then like we have to step in our fishing boats with
Yeah.
the heart that we have and the passion that we have and take the lead.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So good. Oh, thank you so much for coming on, Mel. This was such a fun conversation and such a needed conversation. Where can people find you online? How can they work deeper with you?
Yes, thank you, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure. So if you're looking for me online, you can find me on Instagram at Get Called In, also on Threads at that same handle. And if you want to work with me, I've got lots of cool things. Like I said, I've got that free resource, like The World is Burning, What Do I Do, that you can download for free and start to work through some of this yourself. I also have a course that's called Giving for Impact, which literally is the blueprint for how you can use the money in your business and actually create a
Mhm.
strategic approach to giving that's
Mm.
going to help you to do all the stuff we talked about. It's going to help you to really focus. It's going to help you to figure out how you want to give in a way that makes the most impact. And it's also going to help get rid of some of this overwhelm that comes with, I don't know where to give my money. And I've got 50 million GoFundMe's like sliding across my page at all times. This is what is going to help you get into your position and do so in a way that like feels good for you, for your business, for your brand. So that is another resource that I offer. And then of course, if you want to keep in touch, feel free to DM on Instagram and or I would say hop on my email list. That's where we get into the spicy, fun, nitty-gritty stuff that comes with this work.
Oh, so good. Okay, everyone, definitely let us know what came through with that visualization. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Mel, and we'll
Thank you,
see you
Sam.
next week.